Chair of the Rail Committee, Councilmember Klein.
Thank you, and as you can tell, Richard's been doing a very good job as being one of our staff people for this committee. I think when did you join the city? 2 years ago now?
Yeah, June 2010.
Little did you think that your career was going to be solely around high-speed rail. I want to give a political twist to all the things that Richard's been saying. And it's as much for those few people who may be watching us as it is for the council, because I don't think I've ever encountered an issue which has such cognitive dissonance as this one. As I go around the town and talk to people, and other council members, particularly rail committee members, have had this experience, and I know that council members in other cities have had the same experience. The conversation goes something like this. Well, I know you're involved in high-speed rail. It's pretty much over, isn't it? It's not going to happen, is it? Isn't that right? Said citizens over and over again. So I think that the majority of our fellow citizens think that this project is so ill-conceived that it just can't possibly happen. The Sacramento reality is quite the opposite. Very much the opposite. All the feedback we get from our lobbyists and frankly from our elected officials is that it is very likely to happen. And that is, by it I mean the vote that Richard described on the budget that would allocate the issuance of bonds, of $3 billion worth of bonds this year to be used with the other $3+ billion from the feds, and the construction would start this year. That is all the input we get from Sacramento is that is much more likely to happen than not. So I want to urge all of us and all of the citizens who may be watching, please write, text, phone, Twitter, whatever your preferred means of communication is, communicate with State Senator Simidian, Assemblymember Gordon, and Assemblymember Hill, and former Assemblymember Lieber. I mentioned the last two. They don't represent Palo Alto right now. Neither one of them ever has. But they're running for the open state Senate position that Senator Simidian has to leave because of term limits at the end of this year. So that either Jerry Hill or Sally Lieber is going to become our representative. So those four people need to hear from us that we want them to vote no on any funding of high-speed rail. That's to counteract the pressure that they are getting from the leadership in the Assembly and the State Senate. They are getting immense pressure to vote yes. And none of those four people is committed to voting no. As good as Joe Simidian has been on this issue, he still says that he would vote for high-speed rail if done right. Whatever that means, and there's no clear definition of that. But this is only human nature, that people who want to pursue a political career don't want to buck the leadership. By leadership, I mean not just the Speaker of the Assembly, we're talking about the governor. So they need to feel countervailing pressure from us. And so we can't have people just accepting the idea that this is such a bad idea, so badly implemented, that it just has to fall of its own weight. Well, it's not in Sacramento, and that's where the votes are. So this is a plea. Please communicate in any way you can with those four people to urge them to vote no, either now or after the November election. And it's not just on high-speed rail. Richard has sort of alluded to it, but there are other things going on that are possibly very inimical to our interests. For example, one thing that keeps being raised is the possibility of the High-Speed Rail Authority seeking an exemption from the environmental impact report laws in order to avoid some of the problems they're presently having. In other words, to gut our environmental protection by a change in the law. And the the new chair of the California High-Speed Rail Authority, Dan Richard, dances around that issue. Dan dances? Sorry. But he's been asked many times whether the authority is going to be seeking that. And he says, well, you don't know. We're not doing anything right now, but you never know what the future is going to bring. So I think that we have our Sacramento people monitoring this very, very carefully because this is likely to be a bill that isn't introduced with a great deal of fanfare, much more likely to be an amendment to a pending bill or to a what's the right phrase? What is it, Molly? No, gut and amend or whatever it is. So that it'd be likely one of those things that might come up on a Friday night for consideration the following Monday or Tuesday. The question comes about is why is the governor why is the governor pushing this so hard? This does have impact on the general fund. The bonds are not free money. Once the bonds are issued, the interest on them has to be paid each year. If we issued the full $9 billion that was authorized by Proposition 1A, the annual cost would be on the order of $600 or $700 million a year. And that money has to come from somewhere out of the state's general fund budget. And the answer, as right now, is that would obviously crowd out something else, and you can choose which programs that you might think that be the candidate. Is it going to be prisons? Is it going to be the highway patrol? Or is it much more likely going to be education and welfare? Someone is going to be hurt unless somehow the money appears from floating down from the sky. So there's a lot at stake here, and this is not over by any manner of means, and I hope that we can communicate to our legislators our concern, our whole community's concern about this issue. And I want to emphasize that Sacramento can be a tricky place, so it's not just a straight up and down vote. For example, one strategy we are told that's being considered by the proponents is that the funding for high-speed rail, as Richard has outlined, would not necessarily be included in the general budget that will be passed by our state constitution, has to be passed by June 15th. But instead it would be somehow put off, or not included, but put off to a later vote sometime in the summer, presumably while people are off on vacation or otherwise not paying attention. One other political element I think we need to mention, which we haven't yet, is the pressure being put on the state government by the federal government. Transportation Secretary LaHood made a visit to Sacramento 2 weeks ago now, saying that the federal government wanted the state to act very swiftly, and sort of threatening that without much legal backing, that the feds would remove their $3 billion if the state did not act swiftly. This may have been intended as a pressure, particularly on Senator Simitian, who's talked about needing more time to study this and not wanting a vote until August. So you have various political wheels within wheels acting here, and that again, the only way we can really handle this have any modicum of impact is to really monitor all of this very, very, very closely. The governor keeps saying that I want to circle back to that he's pushing this program because he has this vision of the future, and so he continually says we can do this for less. It's what we need for the 21st or 22nd centuries and so forth, and basically ignoring all of the reports that keep coming in pointing out various flaws. And just one more and I'll conclude. One of the latest, I think, was brought up by Los Angeles Times. You remember, Richard, on the amount of money to be spent per day? I think it was by some people in Southern California.
Yeah, I think the burn rate was about 3 million a day.
No,
or
no,
three-
yes. Where we are now would require the federal money is conditioned on the project basically being completed by September 2017. To get to that point, to spend necessary money would require that the project spend or be spending for the various improvements a total of $3.5 million a day. It turns out that that is an immense amount of money for any construction project. The New Bay Bridge, for example, is spending about half that, and that's a very significant project, obviously, as we all know. It turns out that there's never been a project in the United States that spent that money that rapidly. And of course, the answer the High-Speed Rail Authority has had when presented with those numbers is, we can do it. Maybe they can, maybe they can't, but it will be an extraordinary achievement if they can. So it's a problem that seems to have no end of complexity. It's one where we have a lot at stake, and others do as well. I did have to add one other thing to Richard's. Sorry, we do have allies. Richard mentioned that we hear that the agricultural interests in the valley are going to be suing. It's more than that. They've made a public announcement that the farm bureaus of Merced and what's the next county to Merced?
Kings County?
No, it's not Kings. Madera, thank you, have publicly announced that they're filing objections to the EIR. There is another lawsuit that's in progress challenging the blended system that Richard was describing as being inconsistent with Proposition 1A and therefore an illegal expenditure of state funds. There are other litigation, the ones we're part of, but other people are threatening as well. So lots of different moving parts, and glad to answer any other questions that the colleagues may have.
All right, thank you very much.